All right, I got the layers to my roses finished, at least at this point. Now I'm ready to do the centers. And before I stopped my camera the last time, I could not think of the word marathon. There is a Harry Potter marathon on today. So find something fun like that and just paint and just keep layering. And just be sure to let each layer dry before you do anything else on top of it. I did want to show you something that you can also do to finish out your roses. I have a clean brush. I'm going to grab just white. And then I'm just going to kind of go around. Oh, and look, I can see I have a little bit of yellow in that white, but that's okay. You can really just do some of these choppy lines around it too and just create a little extra texture. Not sure with this horrible lighting if you can really see that very well. But anyways, we're gonna put our centers in our flowers. So if your black is dried up like mine is, you wanna shake up your black, and you really need just a chocolate chip amount. You hardly need any. I'm gonna wash that white out of my brush. And then with my clean brush, I'm just going to put just the corner in my black. See how there's just paint right there? And then into my centers. It doesn't need to be a perfect circle, just kind of put a little bit of a shape in there. It definitely does not need to be big. I'm gonna grab a little more paint just on the corner of my brush. Just kind of darken up that center. And you could put the black center in and let it dry before you ever started this process. That would be totally fine too. But sometimes I end up changing where I thought the center of my flower was gonna be. So I just kind of like to wait till the very end. Then I'm gonna take my smaller brush and I've got some white left over here. I'm gonna dip the butt of my brush into my white paint. And I'm just gonna put a couple little seeds or highlights or whatever you want to think of them as into the centers of my flowers. Now I probably should have let my black dry better before I did this part. So if you want to give yours a second to dry. It just adds another interesting texture. And there are flowers, so it doesn't have to be like a real thing. It can just be because we think it's pretty. So anyways, then I'm gonna clean the butt of my brush off, and now we're going to do some greenery to kind of fill in. Before I do that, I'm gonna pick up my flat brush again, it's clean. I'm going to load white. So my brush is loaded thinly, very thinly with white. I'm gonna very thinly grab a teeny bit of black. So you can see this is how your brush should be loaded. It should not look like this. Do you see how thick and clumpy that paint is? We definitely don't want that because what we want is just a very faint, little scant amount of paint on our brush, and we're going to kind of sharpen up the edges of our box. And we don't want it to be so stark. Like everything else on our picture is very kind of, oh, light, wispy. It's not super thick and heavy, so we wouldn't want our box to be super thick and heavy. So it's kind of hard for me to do this from the side. So forgive me if my lines aren't perfect, which they're definitely not gonna they're not gonna be. My bristles are way too dry. Okay. Oh my, it's pretty wonky. Gosh, can you hear the birds outside? I love it. All right. I'm gonna take all of the liquid out of my brush, load it with just a teeny bit of black. Now I hardly have any paint in my brush and I do not have any liquid. Just a little teeny bit of black, and I'm almost dry brushing again. And you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, I thought we were done with the dry brushing. I mean, let me show you something. Do you see how my bristles are starting to separate? And if you look at the tip of my bristles, they're not sharp and together. I hope you can see that. With my old eyes, I can't really see that. I would have to take off my glasses and look right up at the camera to see if it's picking up on that. But if you barely touch the tip of your water and you kind of flip your brush on both sides. Now if you look at the tip of my brush, it's very sharp. It's together. My bristles aren't separated anymore. That's really important. If you're not getting the line look that you want, always check your bristles and make sure that they're not all separated. Okay, I'm gonna put a little bit more shadow here. That's a little too much. So now what I have on my brush is really almost like watercolor. It's very light. Just gonna kind of, you know, where those flowers are kind of hanging out of my box, just adding a little bit more shadow. All right, washing my brush out, gonna lay my brush down. I know my foil is pretty full, but I still have room. Now I'm gonna use some of this, I guess it's called Hauser Light Green. I really like this color. So, and you don't need a whole lot. So I'm gonna plop down about a dime's worth. And then I'm gonna shake back up our Calypso Blue, which is what we used down here in our chippy table. I'm just gonna put them side by side. I'm gonna use mostly green. I'm gonna mix at times a little green with blue. I'm going to at times mix a little green with yellow. And I may at some point throw just a smidge of white in. And the reason for all of that is the same reason that we used all those colors with our flowers. It's because I like to see all those different shades that we can get. So now our greenery, really, we're just gonna make it up. It's not like we have to go look at a rose leaf and create exactly what a rose leaf looks like. Honestly, off the top of my head, I couldn't even tell you what a rose leaf looks like. But I'm just gonna use my imagination. So I loaded my brush with green, and I have just a little teeny bit of blue. And in these in-between spaces of my flowers, I'm just gonna kind of fill it in with a little greenery. Don't overthink this part. All right, I think here, I'm gonna kind of, now I like a lot of color and I like to see different shades of color. So you'll notice right in there has more blue in it. Now I loaded my brush heavier with green. So that leaf almost has a tie-dye look because you can see the different variations. This time I grabbed a little bit of yellow in my brush and you'll see how that'll make just a slightly different shade of green. I'm gonna fill that in. I really love blue and green mixed together in my greenery. I just think it's just really pretty to me. You can make fat leaves, skinny leaves. There really is no rhyme or reason. There is no right or wrong. You do just want to be careful that you don't get into your flower paint. That's kind of a funky one. Let me see what I can do to fix it. I just don't like the way that looks. Maybe I like that a little bit better. I'm gonna come back in with a little bit of yellow on top of this leaf and kind of give it a little bit of a highlight. I feel like this leaf here, kind of tucked in there, should be a little more shadowy up in here. So I'm gonna use my blue to kind of create a little bit of a shadow. You can get all fancy and you can just create some make-believe thing, greenery kind of coming up out of there. I'm gonna start to grab a little bit of white so I can create maybe a little different shade. What I don't want, and this is just me and my personal taste, I just don't want all my leaves to be exactly the same color. Now again, it would not be wrong if you preferred that. It would not be wrong at all. I think the fun part about this is the different shades that you can try. And that you can just purely use your imagination. Now see, this is kind of dark back here, and then now I can just kind of go over it with smaller little swipes with my brush. So now that darker behind it, it just kind of gives that more texture. Now if you'll look at my brush, because I now have painted quite a bit of greenery, if you look at my brush, see how my bristles are separated and kind of messy? So I'm not going to get nice fine lines with this. So at this point, I'm going to I'm gonna barely dip the tip of my bristles into my water. I'm gonna kind of go up the side of my glass, flipping my brush back and forth. And I have a nice hard edge again. So I'm gonna go back at it. When you have a nice hard edge on your brush, you can get finer line work. And I think using some of the blue up here in our greenery kind of ties the whole picture together because we have this chippy blue paint. I think this picture is absolutely a beautiful picture to paint. I'm so excited to see what you guys create. I think the biggest thing with this part is just not to think about it too much. And I really don't love the way this leaf comes out of here, but that's okay. Don't be too hard on yourself. Just have fun with the process. I'm gonna get just a teeny bit more blue. I really like the way that blue in my greenery kind of pulls the picture together. And I'm gonna kind of turn my picture this way. Okay, I like that greenery. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna wash this brush out. But before I say that I'm completely done with green, we have a few more things we're gonna do. I have a clean brush. I'm gonna take out just tap it on both sides of my paper towel, take out some of the water. I'm gonna load very lightly with green. And then before I touch my canvas, I'm gonna kind of, maybe even I think on my paper towel, I think we're gonna take off most of the paint. So now I have very, very light green. Now down here on my chippy table, I'm just gonna rub in just the slightest little bit of green here and there. I'm sure there's some art term for it. To me, again, it just kind of pulls it all together, and I just really love to see some of my picture colors into my table. I don't know what it is about it, but I love it. So can you see that? Is that showing up? Can you see how I put a little bit of green down there in the table? Something that I do sometimes say at my paint parties too, so you may have heard me say this. I feel like every time I paint a picture, I get a little bit more bold. I get a little bit more free with my colors, not quite as afraid. And I also say too that once you've painted the same picture 3 times, you could probably teach a paint class. Every time I paint a particular picture, it's different. And if it wasn't different, I would not still be painting because that would bore me straight to tears. Okay, I love, love, love that table now. So now I'm gonna clean this brush out and I'm just gonna sit it down to the side. Now we're gonna do just a few wispy pieces of grass in our greenery. So if you have a skinny brush, it can be one that has kind of a short amount of bristles. It can be one, let me find one here, that has, can you see that? Longer bristles. For me, it's easier when I'm gonna do really fine wispy lines. It's easier for me to do that with the longer brush. So I'm gonna take my skinny liner brush. I'm gonna wash out my Murphy's oil soap. Remember, that's what I clean my brushes with. And then, if you can see my palette here, I know it's getting really full, but I always think my palettes, I love them when I'm finished painting. I think that's so pretty. It kind of shows the whole journey of this picture. Anyways, I'm going to put my paintbrush in the water and then I'm gonna pull it out with all that water in it. And I'm just gonna kind of roll my brush. Can you see me rolling it in between my fingers? Let me turn this just a little bit. I'm gonna get another brush full of water and I'm just rolling it into that little bit of green and blue that I had left, so that what I have on this brush is much thinner paint than what we've been painting with, because I added 2 brushfuls of water. I'm sure it's probably not gonna show up. I'm gonna grab another brush full of water. I don't know if you can see that. See how I'm just rolling my brush gently on its side, mixing that water and paint together. I roll my brush in, I roll my brush out to kind of squeegee off some of the water and some of the paint. And then I can come in here and I can put a couple little curly cues into my greenery. And I'm gonna grab more water. Now, depending on where you're putting your curly cues, you might need to add some yellow to your paint so that it shows up. You might need to add some white. You might need to add some of the blue. But the only way that you can make those little fine lines, your paint has to be thinned down more the consistency of ink than the consistency of paint. It's got to be thin. It's got to be watery. And you've got to roll that brush in that puddle and then roll the brush out of the puddle so that you don't have too much wet paint in there. Where else should I put one? You really don't need a ton. Just here and there. I'm going to grab a little bit of white and lighten up this one. my brush in it. I roll it out, squeegee it off. All right, I'm gonna clean my brush off. I need a little bit of white, and what I have on my palette is not gonna work, but anywhere on here where there's foil or where my paint is dry is perfectly fine. I'm just gonna squirt out teeny tiny little bit with the butt of my brush. I'm gonna dip it into my white, and just to add more texture, I love texture, I'm gonna put some, I don't know, I guess maybe like baby's breath. Now wherever you want a little bit larger of a dot, you just kind of sit the butt of your brush down and you just kind of roll it around and create a bigger dot. Everywhere else, just kind of, I just like to make some bigger dots because I like all my dots not to be exactly the same size. I like to have different sizes in there. Really, there's no wrong place to put some of these. If you don't have enough paint on the butt of your brush, it won't work. You won't get nice dots. We're almost done. I hope you guys had as much fun as I did. I will say this is not as fun as having you guys in a room laughing and carrying on and asking questions. But it has been really fun. For right now, when we have to, you know, stay socially distanced, I feel like this is the next best thing. So thank you so, so much for painting with me. Now, before we totally finish, we're gonna do some toothbrush splatter, which I love. It's not necessary, but for one, it's fun, and for two, I just think it adds a little something more to this picture. So I've got some black here left on my palette. You don't need very much. You do need an old toothbrush that you're not gonna use anymore. I'm gonna dip it into my water. I'm gonna tap out most of the water, and then I'm gonna scrub that into my black paint. Now, before you would dare to put this over top of your finished picture, this is learn from my mistakes. You always want to test it over your palette first. You want to hold the bristles towards your face. You want your thumb on the very top of the bristles. And then you want to point your toothbrush directly down at your picture, first your palette, because let me tell you what can happen. These can hold a lot of water, and you can be completely finished with your picture and go to do this final part, and instead of getting these really cool little flecks of paint, you get these big blowout watery raindrops, and that's definitely not what we want. I already tested it, so I know it's okay. Can you see where I tested that on the white? That's what you're looking for. Thumb at the very top, bristles towards your arm. Now I'm gonna point down, and I'm gonna run my fingernail across my toothbrush. Now, you don't wanna completely cover your whole picture. That would look, I don't know, kind of maybe a little I don't know. I think goofy, maybe make it look a little juvenile. I do want a little bit more than what I have on there because I do really like this part. I just think if you had too much, it would kind of take away from your picture. I don't know what I think this is, other than just, for me, it just makes it a little more interesting. Anyways, I hope that you can see that. Another thing that you can do if you don't have a toothbrush to use, you can take your flat brush, fill it, put it down into your water cup, put it into your watery black paint. So see, really, this is really watery. This is not what you'd want to like paint with, but it'll work great to put some bigger splatters. I'm going to first test it here. See, it's definitely making bigger watery drops. So I'm going to be careful. But let's see here. And just kind of hit the end of your brush. See, I maybe have too much at this point, but I do like this. Okay. Now I'm going to wash that paint out of my good brush. And really, at that point, you're finished. You could do, on my other sample, I did some white speckles. So I'm going to spill. Here I'm going to just fold my foil down. I'm going to put a little drop of white. I'm going to scrub my toothbrush into that white paint. Tap it out. I'm going to check it here first. Make sure I don't have entirely too much paint. All right. Other than taking your skinny brush and putting your name somewhere down here when those speckles are dry, I would say you're finished. So thanks for painting with me. I really, really appreciate it. I hope that you had as much fun as I did, and hopefully we'll be able to paint together soon again. And please post your pictures on my Facebook page, Mary Grover Davis, because I would love to see what you end up creating. Thanks again. Thank you again for painting with me. I just wanted to bring you into my room, show you the old chippy table that I really did rescue out of somebody's trash. I absolutely love these colors, but I drug it in from my garage to have a place to set some of my work files and basically to create a place to work from home. So this is where I'm going to sit my cheerful picture. I would love to see where you guys end up putting yours. Thanks again for painting with me. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, and hopefully we will be painting together soon. Take care.